Hello friends and welcome back to my shop where I make things like this. My goal for this week is to get the pens to a fully functional state where I can then start applying all the fun anodizing patterns and whatnot. So this morning I'm going to start with, I'm going to finish polishing the pen tubes. Actually first I'm going to polish the tips and the tails so I can get those mounted to the pen tubes to make sure they all fit up nicely. Get the pen tubes polished, and from that then I can start indexing for pocket clips and then thread mill the final holes for the pocket clips, and then we're pretty much done. I mean, I still have to run the sliders on the lathe, but that's fairly automated so I'm not too worried about that. Pocket clips are basically fully machined. This last stage just drills them out and puts the chamfer on. I want the chamfer at a very consistent depth and location. That's why I do this in soft jaws. Once that's done, I bring it to the drill press and just flip it over and put a micro edge break on the backside where the drill came through. Just one less thing I have to focus on in finishing. And then I chase it with the hand drill, and that just breaks off the secondary burrs raised from chamfering. Once again, just little stages that help final finishing go much faster. Next we have the end cap milling. I basically put the end cap into soft jaws and mill the pocket for the pocket clip. Then we drill it, and then we thread mill it. Thread milling is my very favorite now because you can dial the thread fit to be just perfect. In this case, I basically run the operation about 90% complete, and then there's a pause in the code that lets me just check it with a screw. And if I find it a little bit tight, I can carry on through with the code, which will do one more spring pass to kind of loosen it up. But if I find it fits nice there, I can stop the code there. So it's a really nice way to get a really proper fit. I put the pocket clip in, then I give it the ding test. I basically just force the clip in. I want the press fit to be just nice. I don't want it to slop in, but I want it to be a little bit tight right now because when it goes through tumbling, it's gonna get a little looser. And I just want the fit up to be really nice. So on this batch of pens, we remachined all the sliders because the inner bore is slightly larger with the new drilling and reaming procedure I'm using. Which is also nice because they're way more consistent. In the past, I had sliders in varying sizes so I could adjust the action. But in this case, they're so consistent that I have one size slider for all the pens. The bores are within about 2/10 through the whole batch. I'm pointing behind me because that's where they're sitting right now. I'm not just a crazy person. So it lets me use one size slider for all the pens, and the fit up has been perfect. So I'm very happy with that. Rough turn them, finish turn them, part them off, and then the lathe auto advances to the next section of stock and carries on machining. In this case, it actually didn't advance because the bar was too short in this stage. So you can see it basically fed not enough bar out, so which means I have to change out bars in this lathe, which is kind of tedious, but I have to do it so infrequently, it's really not that big a deal. Go in the back of the lathe, pull the piston out with a big tool, swap a new bar in place, get it aligned with the collet, lube the piston back up, put it in there, put the air fitting back on the end, and that's how it advances. It basically just pushes air to the piston to keep pressure on the work, and I can control when that air is on or off, so I can advance the bar whenever I see fit. By changing the slider pin diameter, I also have to change the fixture that holds it for the next stages because the larger pins no longer fit. So what I did is I took the rear soft jaw, put it in the vise, and then put a piece of plastic behind it, just so when I ran the ream, it didn't have a tendency to bounce out of the hole. It's an interrupted cut, so I just kind of wanted to give it a little more stability. With it reamed to size, we put it back in the vise, indicated everything in, and then went ahead and machined all the slider pins. There's actually a lot of stages for machining these pins. It looks like it's just a simple threaded hole, but it's a hole with a flat bottomed counter bore, and then it comes in with an end mill and interpolates some relief for the threads. Then it comes in with a thread mill, and thread mills a hole for the thumb stud, which also has a pause in it, just like my end caps, so I can fine tune it for each thumb studs to get the fit just perfectly. This sounds tedious, but honestly, since I thread gauge all my thumb studs, I know they're all fairly consistent. Once I dial in 1 or 2 slider pins, I know what it's going to be for the batch, so I know if I have to stop at that optional stop each time, or if I can just carry on through and machine away. So it goes pretty quick. Once that's done, the last stage for the sliders is to spin them 180 and put an air groove in the back. This is not super critical, I just want it on the back side of the pin, but I still index it as close to 180 as I can because why not? That's just to stop the air cushion from being created between the top of the slider pin and the end cap. If I don't have that in place, when you cycle the pen to retract, instead of getting a nice crisp click, you kind of get a boom click where it's cushioning itself on the air and then slowly come into contact with the titanium end of the slot. I don't want that. I want a nice crisp click. So there's a little air slot in there, which is just, it's kind of cool to have to do that, to know that the tolerances are so tight that it's trapping air. I don't know, it just makes my brain happy. Thread milling is about the slowest operation on this mill. Just due to the size of the tool, the thread mill is only about a 16th at the end, and the neck is a 32nd. So just by its size, it has to spin quite quickly to get the feed rate where I need it to be. But if I can't spin that fast, I have to feed slower. So it takes probably about 5 minutes, 3 to 5 minutes to do a hole in anywhere on these titanium pens, which sounds crazy slow, but it also means I don't have to do it by hand. So normally when it's doing that operation, I'm sitting here at my desk doing the final fit up on the pen, make sure it fits really nicely before it goes into finishing. The worst thing is finding a pen after finishing that doesn't function perfectly, because that means you have to go back to the machining stage, which usually means you have to run it through a little bit of finishing again, and then through cleaning, and then through final prep. It's a massive slowdown. So I try to get it as perfect as I can at this stage. Even if I know there's going to be some slight feel differences after all the polishing, I get it as close as humanly possible, because going backwards sucks. The last little upgrade I did for this lathe was a way to handle moisture a little bit better. When it came to me, it had a screw-on desiccant filter, which worked okay, but the rate I would have to change it, it was just not a great idea. An active dryer for my compressor would be ideal. It's just not in the cards right now, so I went with a passive system. I basically built a big copper radiator that helps cool the air slightly and let it expand, let the humidity drop out of it right at the source. And that honestly takes care of probably 80 to 90% of my issues. That partially dried air then comes to the compressor, or then comes to the lathe, which goes through a particulate filter, and then it goes through a big container of desiccant. And that is working surprisingly well. I made it easier. I put a little plastic sleeve so I could change the desiccant cartridges faster. But what that lets me do is I take the used desiccant, I put it into my heat treating oven for a few hours, I can recharge it, and in the meantime I have fresh desiccant that I put in, and so once a week I have to change the desiccant in this lathe. Not ideal, but way cheaper than an active air dryer, and for right now it just gives me the peace of mind knowing that the air is getting nice, or the lathe is getting nice, dry air, which is what it likes, and yeah, that'll let it run happily and keep me happy as well. So that's where my B-roll ends for this week. I have no more cool footage to put in, so I will see you guys next week. Thanks again so much. Take care. Bye-bye.